All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Working Class Fishing. I'm one of your hosts, John Morris. To my left, right, top, or bottom is Brian Keachley, and our guest tonight is Josh Goose with a last name that I can't pronounce very well. So he said just call him Goose. So Josh,
Garduzis is a rough one, man.
there you go, folks.
Yeah.
I can't say it, nor can I spell it. But
I can't either.
what I can tell you is Josh is a fly fishing stud, and thanks for coming on, dude. And I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me, brother. I appreciate it, man. It's not the first podcast I've ever done. My brother-in-law and I thought we would be cool when this all kicked off. We thought we'd be an original by sitting around a fire and drinking. So doing podcast sober is another thing for me. So I appreciate the opportunity, man. That's awesome.
No, there's no requirement to be sober, but I guess if you want to have some kind of composure, that's.
I'll stick to my coffee. I'll just get wired off of that.
There you go. Right on.
It's 7:30 at night.
Josh, dude. So we met through Instagram. I think you actually reached out to the podcast first. Because I saw messages going back and forth between you and Brian when I was at work, and then you hit me up and you're like, "Hey, I saw you were in Arkansas." I was like, "Yeah," I was like, "Who is this guy?" And then turns out we're pretty decent friends now.
Yeah.
But Josh, dude, tell us about yourself, man. Tell us what you do.
So, I guess the life of a trout bum is one of those where it kind of writes itself. I mean, if you know, you know. But I'm actually relatively new to the Ozarks. I guess came from Indiana. I'd spent the last 5 years there before I'd lived in Illinois. And made my way down into the Ozarks. Originally was going to pass through and go work in Oklahoma. Then I discovered fly fishing in Arkansas and was like, Oklahoma doesn't sound that great anymore. And let's stick down here for a little bit and see what happens. So, I have no plans on leaving. It's become home. I love it down here.
There's something beautiful about those Ozark Mountains and about those trout streams. And Arkansas is pretty, man. I didn't always thought of it as like, they sell one really big bed to the whole family because they all sleep in the same bed.
Yeah. So you've been here a time or two.
Yeah, a couple times. But it truly is a gorgeous place.
It is. I thought it was funny because, if you were to tell me, 10 years ago, you'd be interested in, living in the Ozarks, and I'd have told you, you were stoned on something because it just didn't seem like, it'd be an interesting place. And I guess, as you get older and interests start to change, I've fished my entire life. I mean, ever since I had a car, there wasn't many times there wasn't a fishing rod in it. I'd come off of work and I'd, work at a shop or something like that. And I'd get off and go fish a bass pond with a buddy for, 3-4 hours after work, and we'd just sit and talk BS. And I mean, it was an integral part of my life. And now I'm fortunate enough to, come down and be within, if you're really good at throwing rocks, distance away from arguably one of the greatest trout streams in the Ozarks. I haven't fished across. I know, Brian, you said you're out in Oregon. And from what I see, people posting on Instagram or things like that of, fishing out west, and the stories I've heard from my cousins, because they have fished out west, it's insane. And I'd love to do it, but this is home for me,
Well, I think there's something special about each place you fish, because I think one thing we do as anglers is we go out and we want to go everywhere but around ourselves. And that's cool. More power to the people that want to travel and do that. But there's something special about the places that we can get to that are, you know, like you said, a stone's throw away, where we can actually put the, you know, time in on that piece of water and enjoy ourselves. It doesn't require a big expense. It doesn't require you to, you know, get passports or, you know, get really technical equipment, or, you know, even have that feeling of needing to have, like, you know, as a fly angler, this perfect cast, or else the guide's going to get mad at you or something like that. You can go there and you can just play around. You can throw whatever you want, and it's no obligation, and, you know, you can have fun with it. I think that's really cool that you're honed in there in the Ozarks and the trout streams in the Ozarks. I guess my first question for you is in the Ozarks, you have a lot of different species of fish. You have bass, obviously, and panfish and trout and all that kind of stuff. And you're into trout quite a bit. What drew you into the trout in the Ozarks specifically? What was that?
So I got my cousins down here, as well as my uncle, and I'd moved down here, moved in with my uncle, and we're within throwing distance of my cousin's house. And my cousins are a little bit older. I promise my family tree does fork. So my one cousin is 81, and when I say a little older, he's up there. His wife is, my blood, and they were the ones who actually got me in fly fishing. And I mean, my cousin Jim, he'd been trout fishing for the past millennia. I mean, it's what he grew up doing, and they really drew me into it. Kind of showed me what it was like to use a fly rod and things like that. So it did spark an interest in trout. But living up north, there wasn't a lot of available trout water. So my first real getting after something on a fly rod was actually steelhead. And I'm going to get crucified for calling them steelhead because they were Lake Michigan big rainbows. Yeah, they were steelhead, hatchery raised, and super green behind the ears doing it. I'm using a 5-weight rod, 9 foot long. Like, looking back on, man, if I hooked up to one, that thing was gonna explode. So coming down here, I'd done a little bit of trout fishing up north. They do have some ponds that they would stock seasonally, and they were always fun. But traditionally, as a bass angler, you tend to look at, fly fishermen or trout as kind of a goofy species of, they're small, they're what's the allure to it? And when I came down here, I'd never fished a river for trout before. And it was the first time on the Spring River, and my cousin and I are out there waiting, and I got a bump, and that's all it took. I mean, the cliche everyone's tired of hearing of, the tug is the drug. And I left that day empty-handed and came back the next day, and I think I caught like 3 or 4 or 5. Like, okay, let's keep going. And there's now some days where you just lay waste to them. I can throw numbers out there that people wouldn't believe of how many you can catch in a day, and I think it's the means of catching them that makes it so much more interesting. And the deeper you get into it, especially with trout, it's more of hunting for them instead of, with bass, I feel, it's a pretty standard. You can chunk a big piece of plastic out there and something will come by and eat it. But I mean, with trout, it's so finicky, even minute to minute of, you cast something out there and it's been hot for, the past 10 fish.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden it just lights her out. Now you got to find something else, and maybe they've moved 3 feet and you don't know it. And it brings a whole new element to fishing that was a challenge. Definitely definitely a well fought challenge. And I feel it's something you're never not gonna enjoy because you're always learning with it. You know, I hope that answered your question. I ramble.
Yeah, no, it did. No, that's that. You're absolutely right about trout. I don't know what it is. They're little, they're weird, but
They
the way
got an
that they
IQ of
bite,
6, and it says a lot about the people who fish them. You know.
yeah. You know, some of them, I mean, you can get slobs, that's for sure. And you know,
Yeah.
to defend the Great Lakes steelhead, they are steelhead in that capacity. They're not Pacific steelhead, but they're, you know, they go out into a large body of water, they feed, and they come back to a tributary to spawn. So, you know, they're definitely not ocean run fish. Now, I've seen some people get their butt kicked by them, and it's really hard for me to believe, especially after hooking things that have lived in the ocean, that they can kick your butt. But
Yeah.
they're big. They're big. They're there.
Yeah. I had always had a healthy respect for steelhead, especially. Mostly because my first chance getting after steelhead with that, you know, little 9'5" weight Bass Pro Rod, uh, I had better luck reaching down in the water and grabbing one than I did actually hooking it. I had no idea what I was doing. They were like, "Yeah, use salmon eggs." I'm like, "This tackle fly says salmon eggs. Cool, let's try that." Didn't know you needed to have weight. Um, so this is 7 years ago now.
Mhm.
And it was miserable. I'm just like, well, I'm gonna go back to panfish because that is a lot easier. And you know, I get a little giggle every time, you know, you set too hard because you thought it was a little bigger, and you're like,
Yep.
oh, I just
Done
brought
that.
him into another area. Couldn't bring him back.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I'd
Dude,
done that with a trout yesterday, and my buddy, you know, it was slow yesterday. I was fishing with a buddy, and finally I went to one of my hamburger flies as an indicator, and you know, ran a dropper, and that thing went under, and I set this trout was skipping across the water, and he's like, "Good Lord." I'm like, "Man, it went down." I got excited, don't know what happened. Here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
dude, so you make this transition, you're moving your way down here to the south, and you said you fish your whole life. So where, because I came from a bass background myself, you know, that's what I did growing up. Like my whole life was fishing for bass and bluegill and white bass and all that stuff. And I lived like 35 minutes from like a world, not a world famous, but like in Tennessee, it was a famous Tennessee trout fishery. I didn't even know it. I didn't even know it. We didn't, you know, trout wasn't the deal. But were you able? That was a long runaround way to get here. Were you able to apply some of those things that you've learned through your angling experience prior to trout fishing?
Trout fishing or fly fishing in general?
Let's say fly fishing and let's go trout fishing after that.
Because I can really only speak on one because that's all I do anymore is fly fish.
Yeah,
I've been converted, so all the bass
same.
people out there are like, God, here we go again. Here's another one. So there is a lot of things that translated over, especially when it came to, you know, fishing streamers or you know, just understanding holding water, which in a river, you know, obviously is a little different than your still water, but same idea. It's hot, fish go down, you know, it's cool, there's bugs on top of the water, excuse me, fish go up. I mean, if we keep things to a simple understanding like that, 90% of your fishing, cool, you know, we're all on the same page. But even the retrieval of streamers, you know, varying your retrieve, excuse me, stripping back, you know, two big poles, half a pole, one pole, whatever. Um, it's the same idea as retrieving, you know, your Senkos, your flukes, your crankbaits. Um, and outside of that, I'm sure there's a lot more comparisons that could be drawn between the two, but I can't think of any. Goes back to at trauma and being a layman. I I've always had to say is that, fly fishing outside of, spin casting or anything like that, it's the fishing equivalent of driving stick.
Mm-hmm.
So you are fully in control of, everything that the other end of that line is doing, you know. So as far as translating, and where to fish and how to fish, the where to fish, sure, that's always the same in rivers, or if you're fishing a stock trout pond or whatever, which we did have up north. But outside of that, man, it had been so long since I picked up a spinning rod now and didn't fish for catfish that I don't. It's just become the new norm for me. So I guess I've slept since then.
So then, coming from the north to the south, basically, coming from the Great Lakes area to the Ozarks and
Now, don't tell my boss that, because he thinks I'm from Iowa.
oh, okay. Well, okay. So coming from Iowa, so coming from Michigan to and fishing there, growing up fishing there, culturally, what do you notice that's different about fishing in, I guess are the Ozarks considered part of the South? I guess they would be, right?
Missouri is the southernmost northern state or the northernmost southern state, depending on which side of the border you're on.
That we'll call a six of one, half dozen of another.
And I sat there on the river one day and thought of that saying, and it took me about 45 minutes to figure out exactly what that meant. I was in a moral dilemma.
Yeah, there was another one from Wisconsin. I believe it was called a horse apiece. I'd never heard it before, but I had somebody come up to me and say, "Oh, it's a horse apiece." I was like they called cornhole bags. They were like, "Hey, you want to go out and play bigs?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay."
That I grew up doing.
Okay,
I almost lost a job.
It's blood sport there.
Notre Dame.
Yeah, I remember a fist fight almost broke out on the banks of Lake Winnebago in between Miller Lights and Bratwurst. Anyways, that's another.
It sounds like you grew up right where I was.
Yeah, well, I didn't grow up there. I visited there. This was actually put on by a company that was doing some training, but there was like jet skis. And I'm like, man, that'd be a fun lake to fish. And all of a sudden, here's this guy. He's like, "Oh, you SOB," and he like launches this bag at this other guy, and then the Miller High Life bottle goes flying. only there, I was waiting for the bratwurst to go flying next and the birthday cheese. No offense to people from Wisconsin.
Exactly.
I'm just like, okay, anyways, so
bunch of cultural green t-shirts everywhere.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah, cheeseheads.
Yeah, cultural differences though, between the two.
Yeah, like in the fishing cultures between the two. Obviously, the Great Lakes is kind of like, you got those guys. They're kind of like Ahab out there with the Great Lakes. They want an ocean so bad, and that's like their ocean, right? They don't have the Pacific or the Atlantic. They have the Great Lakes. So culturally speaking, big differences.
The people down here are a lot nicer. They weren't kidding when they said Southern hospitality. When I lived in Indiana, I'd fished several places that, there's a couple people that'd be like, "Hey man, come check this spot out," or "Hey, I may know a spot, do you want to tag along," or something like that. But it was largely, if you're within my 500-yard bubble, words are going to be exchanged. So it was very much, you kept everybody at arm's length. And I mean, down here, I find myself doing it all the time of, you see somebody walking along and, they're walking back to their car, head hung low, and you're like, "Get over here, let's get you into a fish before you head out." And, I've had people do the same for me. So I think it is that idea of, we're all in it to enjoy the outdoors, and really when that's all you have to do is be outside and enjoy outside, you want to do it as a collective. And I think a lot of people understand that and are a little bit more welcoming than than some of the people I have dealt with up north. You know, I've heard some pretty interesting horror stories and had some myself where, like, man, we're just fishing. You know, and
Yeah.
this is what I'm doing just to get away from my day to day. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to get yelled at any more than I have to. I cry too much.
Well, that whole combat fishing thing, we get it really bad here. I think it's, you know, Alaska's horrible, especially during different runs, but here, because of private property and access to rivers and things like that, you either have a boat or you don't. And if you have a boat, you're going to have some jerk that wants to, you know, low hole you, or, you know, say you're in my anchor, you know, whatever. And if you're on the bank, you got like 12 guys stacked in next to each other. Everybody's so desperate to catch a fish that, you know, it's just that sheer desperation. I have to catch a fish and I'm going to go fight people for a fish. And I watch people fight over fish that are catch and release.
Yeah.
Really, you know, come on. It's ridiculous.
And it seems to be, especially when, you know, this whole lockdown thing kicked over.
Yeah.
I was on my way from Indiana down here, and I was back in Illinois for a month. You know, just spending some time with the family, and I went fishing, and I got to talking to one guy. He goes, "Man, it's been rough. Everybody's outside. Everybody's fishing." I'm like, "That's awesome, man." He goes, "Hell no, it's not." He goes, "I've been having to swing my arm or my rod around going, you know, 6 foot, 6 foot." And I'm like, geez, all right, you know, and I'll stay over here. Um, but, and that was actually one of the areas that was a trout pond that was stocked. So it was full blown combat fishing. You know, people come out from, you know, 30, 40 miles to catch out all these little stalker trout. And that was actually where I cut my teeth, really fly fishing for trout. And I was the only one who walked into the water. You know, I'm in knee-high muck boots, and you know they're flooded now, and I'm just walking around swamped and playing around with these little, you know, 6, 8 inch thinkers. And I caught 3, and this guy just goes off, and I'm like, what are we doing here? He's like, "I've been here for 4 hours and I ain't caught nothing." I'm like, "Okay, what are you throwing?" He throws out like this spoon that's this big, and I'm like, "Keep trying, man. There's gonna be one in here. There's gotta be." I'm like, I should get out of the water if there's sharks in here, but you know, good luck.
Yeah.
So I tend to stay away from the hotly contested areas of, you know, there are some trout parks that are, you know, famous in Missouri, especially. Opening day, they're like, you know, shoulder to shoulder, and it's everyone's fly fishing. I'm like, I would spend more time getting my line out of your line than I would with a line on the water. So why go? You know? And
Yeah.
I guess some people that's their deal. You know, sometimes it's not about the fishing, it's about the experience. And if your experience is, you know, spending the next 45 minutes redoing your line with your buddy or somebody you just met and now you're fist fighting over it, you know, by all means, man. I ain't gonna stop you.
So, Goose, you're a guide.
Yes. My Instagram handle is I guess the teller of that of Goose Guides Flies. And I had actually had somebody have you met Lorena?
Uh-uh.
No.
Okay. She's like, are you a goose hunting guide? Like, you know, I could see where there'd be a problem with that. But no, I do guide. And it has been a very interesting experience down here. I love it. Just really, this next coming season is going to be, you know, the real, hopefully, big breakout for me. I had started late last season, and I guess it's kind of going back into like shooting sports or things like that. Of after you do it for so long, um, you get more enjoyment out of teaching people or, you know, helping them achieve success than you do yourself. And that's kind of how it turned over into fishing for me, was, you know, watching somebody get their first trout, or, you know, get that first, you know, just stacked beautifully tight loop cast. And they're like, oh, I mean, to me, I get more enjoyment out of watching that now than I do sometimes even catch my own fish, you know. So it's been an experience, and the people I've met along the way, I couldn't be more thankful for.
Dude, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And you do that. I mean, that's one of the keys too. You know, people get all Twitter pated about it, you know, but you have to want them to catch fish more than you want to catch fish. You have to. I mean, being a guide, you're in the service industry. 100%.
You are always wrong.
You are in 100% in the service industry. And have you ever had a bad day out guiding? Maybe just a bad client or something like that you'd like to share, or we're just gonna.
I have had a bad day, and it wasn't because of the client. It was actually because of the fish the client hooked up to. And the client has become a good buddy of mine. And it was a miserable day. I mean, it was just freezing rain. I'm like 75% certain I was mostly soaked at that point. You know, my waders had a hole in them, and you're just gritting and bearing it, and you're like, yeah, no, this is going to be fantastic, man. Let's go have a good time. I am freezing cold, and I'm going to have to be sitting down for a month. So we're sitting there, we get out into the water, and he hooked up to a donkey. And we had just gotten back from king salmon fishing several weeks prior. And I just watched this five weight rod go. I'm like, what do you have on there? You know, I'm expecting a carp, a gar, something. And I see this bow start cutting weight going upstream. And I'm like, okay. So I ditch everything I have and chase after it with a net. And I looked like a fat kid getting after a donut, man. I mean, it was a sight to see. And this thing wound up beaching itself in some shallow water and found its way up underneath a tree root, and turned up under the root, broke off, and I could see him. He's sitting here, you know, the whole time, like, you know, just keep the rod tip, because it is. And I mean, it's bent right in the handle. And I'm like, oh yeah, it is. Okay, cool. It broke off, and I walked over to him and I said, you can't tell anybody that happened. He goes, that you missed netting the fish? I said, no, you tell God and everybody that happened. I said, no one's going to believe how big that thing was. I was like, it is going to sound like the typical fishing story that everybody has, the one that got away. And he goes, you sound like you're going to lose sleep over this. I haven't slept in 4 months, guys.
That's a big fish.
Yeah. It was huge. The largest rainbow I have ever seen. And my personal best came in about 27, 28 inches. And this thing looked like it dwarfed that. I mean, it was a stud.
That's a serious rainbow.
It was huge. And you know, he was still super happy with everything. We had a great day. I got a bigger net since then.
Yeah.
And I told him at the end of the day, I was like, man, I'm so glad, you know, you hooked up to 4 species. He goes, 4? I said, yeah, you caught yourself a rainbow. Yeah. You caught yourself a brown. Yeah. You caught yourself a brim. Yeah. What's the 4th? I said, man, you hooked up to Sylvester Stallone. He goes, man, that thing did have some serious shoulders.
Yeah.
Good night. It was a solid fish. But no, I mean, the people I've been fortunate enough to take out have all been fantastic. The people I've taught all been fantastic people. That's the one thing I like about down here is I really have not met a disagreeable person, and I'm sure they're out there, but I ain't found them yet. So
I think that has a lot to say about the the fly fishing community in the South, if you will call it the South. Um, it's not as abundant. I mean, in the Ozarks, yeah, in Arkansas it is as well, but it's still not the West, and it's still not the
Right.
East.
Yeah.
Where we're still a very niche, if you will, fishing community in the South. And I think that kind of brings us together a little bit more than it does in the other ends of the spectrum here.
Yeah.
I've only met one guy that I thought me and him might fight, and and I still see him on the river all the time. I make sure I don't fish near him.
Right.
But
You know, the people I've met down here, like I said, they've been just outstanding human beings. And largely in part because, like you said, it is a very niche community. Um, and yeah, there's going to be your bad apples in every bunch. I completely understand that. But all in all, I mean, like you said, you just kind of look the other way, and it's no big deal. Uh, the only the only problems I have seen on the river were over access, the typical, get off my property type stuff, and those were all hearsay stories. So, you
Mhm.
know, outside of that, no, never really against another angler or anything like that. I mean, even most all the spin fishermen, hey man, so long as they're doing everything by the books, uh, we can be friends.
Absolutely. Um, so I know a lot of people aspire to be guides, and they say, "Oh man, I should be a fishing guide," and all this other stuff. You've probably heard that a million times, probably experienced it yourself.
Yeah.
What is it really like to be? I
Um,
mean, we kind of talked about this, but what is it really like to be a guide from first trip to now? What is it really like?
so the amount of trips I've had, like I said, I'm new to guiding itself. But I've been slowly transitioning people is the correct term. We're just gonna, call it what it is. I've been converting people from spin fishing to fly fishing now. It is the Bible Belt, so that's definitely possible.
Yeah.
So as far as the uh, the dream and hope of being a guide, some people are like, oh, you get paid to fish. It's like, well, we get paid to take people fishing. We don't fish, but yeah, it's cool. Well, how is it? You always have to come up with a jokey way of putting it. It's like, it's a hard gig. Someone's got to do it, man. It's rough. And they're like, really? It's as hard as you make it. I had learned less is more, and before this, I was remodeling homes. I worked in custodial. I'd worked on cars. I had worked in factories, and a lot of blue collar gigs throughout my life. And this is one of those opportunities where you're now on the service end of those blue collar folks, and you're able to show them the time that you wanted to see while you were doing jobs that they have.
Mhm.
So I think that's really the ticket for me, is to provide that opportunity for somebody to have that getaway. You know, um, I may look into it a little differently than other people, but it's something I'm super passionate about, and it makes the job a lot more fun, uh, by and large, than some of these other people I've heard that they've guided in the past, and they were like, well, it was fun for the first 3 trips, and then it just got super stressful. And I'm like, how? Just take a breather, man. Just Uskaba. And is it for everybody? I have no idea. I tell everybody is I'm a moron. But I'm a moron that likes to fish, and I'm a moron that likes to get people into fish. So, I guess guiding for me was kind of I'd thought about it in the past, and definitely thought of what it would be like to have that job. Listening to Meat Eater and all these hunting guides and fishing
Yeah.
guides, and you're like, man, that sounds awesome. And then you do it, and you're like, it's definitely not what I expected. It, it can be stressful, sure, but it's mostly about the experience. How it was put to me is, we're just fishing buddies. We're fishing buddies that know the spots. You know, so I guess I've been a guide a lot longer. Taking people out fishing back home and throughout my life than I had thought. So it kind of it it's been it's been an interesting experience, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I had to make sure my dog didn't break into the room. The door
Yeah.
comes flinging open.
Yeah. Well,
So-
I'm waiting for my wife to come home, and then the dog. I gotta hit mute on this.
So when you're prepping for a trip, I know you tie a lot because
Yeah.
I tie with you sometimes now. I mean,
Uh,
we talk guide flies and whatnot, but I mean that's the ticket, dude. You find a pattern that's yours or someone else's that's quick to tie,
Yep.
and you pump them out, because if it's catching fish, you need those flies. You can't just have one or even five of that fly for a client.
right.
So in not necessarily, I don't want you to like burn your holes or nothing like that, but if you could pick three flies, doesn't have to be specific colors or anything like that, what would be your three go-tos as a guide? Let's say we've got a brand new guy listening to this. What are three of your flies that you will not go without when you take someone out on a trip?
Eggs, eggs, and a different color egg. I I mean, worms, everything like that. Your basics. And I when I tie my flies and I'm making them in a hurry, I actually put them in chewing tobacco containers. So don't chew if you're out there. It's a terrible habit, but you can make use of the containers. And I mean, this is what I was on the river with today, was this hot mess of stuff. Um, but I'm gonna sound like the broken record of everybody else. So yeah, you can always say eggs, eggs, and eggs. But your eggs, your woolly buggers, your worms, your bare bones flies to go to any waterway and be able to fish successfully. Um, Especially exploring new water. Throw the stuff that people don't want to throw. The sandworm worms and all the other things that aren't pretty and cool, and they kind of fish like a brick. If they catch fish, man, they catch fish. You know, I got a buddy, I love him to death. I was fishing with him today, and we were talking about it because he ties up, the sex dungeons, circus peanuts, all these big Kelly Gallup flies, and game changers, so on and so forth. And the first time I went out there throwing meat with him, he ties on I'm going to get crucified for this because I don't know all the names of the streamers that he throws, and I want to say it was a circus peanut. Things like 6-8 inches long, and first cast smacks the water. He strips once, boom, fish explodes. I'm like, something's wrong here. This doesn't happen. And he reels it up. It's like a 10-inch trout that just mowed over this fly. And I'm like, well, congratulations, brother. You catch fish the same size as your fly. And it's cool. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But if I had to really put a stick in it, I don't go to the river without woolly buggers, without some semblance of egg pattern, or bait fish patterns, and then just nymphs. Are that's my big go-to. But that's just, what I fish personally. But if I had to definitely get somebody into a fish, gun to my head, hopefully they have a jam because I'm tying on an egg, and hopefully she works.
So when you get your clients, and you and I talked a lot about what we stand for with this podcast, the perceived inaccessibility, the people that are touting the real top of the line gear, and they're kind of, if you don't get that, you can't do this, or somebody
Right.
rolls into a fly shop and somebody's trying to, shove a $900 rod down their throat with a $800 reel right out of the gate and all that.
Right.
When you do take people out and you're taking them out fishing, are they coming to you after maybe an experience like that, or are they coming to you without any experience at all?
Largely the people that I've taken out have been, they've had experiences largely positive in the past. And a lot of the people I tend to deal with have absolutely zero experience at all when it comes to fly fishing, which is, it's phenomenal because you have a clean slate. You can make it as enjoyable as an experience as you possibly can. And hopefully leave with that in mind that, hey, this is what it should be or what it can be. So I've heard the horror stories, and I won't name names, but it definitely is disheartening to hear, some of these people that if it's not in their budget, what's feasible for them, and they're told that, hey, no, you can't do it this way because it won't work. It kind of grinds my gears because for a long time, excuse me, I'd fished a $40 rod with a free reel that I had gotten from my cousin, and I'm surprised that thing isn't in 17 pieces as it is, because it has been used as a walking stick. It has saved me from falling in the river. Um, it's caught a muskrat. It's been through some stuff. When we were talking off air about you catching a little salamander, that's where my mind was hooking up to a muskrat, and I'm like, how is this rod not snapped in half yet? It that idea that you need the latest and greatest, top of the line, everything has to be brand name down to your underwear. Can it improve your experience? Sure. Is it necessary for you to go out there and get after something? You can catch fish on stick and line. People have been doing it for a decade or two now, at least what history tells us.
Yeah.
But I have had people come up to me and say, no, I don't want to get into fly fishing because it's expensive. And the first thing I tell them is it is only as expensive as you want to make, and you can see sometimes the wheels turning of, that kind of goes against what I've been told. And in a way, like I said, can solid gear improve your experience? Yes. But it being a necessary factor is a luxury. So to me, if you can get out there with your fishing license, your trout stamp, whatever rod you come with, whatever line you come with, you can have a good time. That is what it's all about. And a lot of people kind of come out and they have their head hung low. I got this rod at a thrift store, and I don't know what it is. And it's like, listen, man, let's go fish. Let's get you into something. Let's see how it feels. If you enjoy it, great. If you want this to become your next big endeavor, sink as much money as you want into it. Go out. Your wife may hate you, then you're going to take up fly tying. Then she's going to be like, hey, you need to, there's all the stories I've heard from people like, my wife's going to kill me. It's like, just don't mention my name, please. So I try to really make it accessible for people, in that if they have a budget in mind, let's keep it within that budget for sure.
Mhm.
Just because times are tough, they've only gotten tougher. And if this is a way for you to go out, enjoy nature, have a little reward, your own peace and serenity, the man, do what makes you happy. If that's going out and buying Thomas and Thomas, by all means, don't let me stop you. If that means going out and picking up, your $40 rod, don't let anybody tell you hide their hair. So yeah, it's I have had those people come up and say that they've had some bad experiences with it, and you can only hope that things change a little bit.
I think they are. I think in a lot of ways, the fly fishing and specifically is becoming more affordable for the masses.
Yeah.
You've got companies out there, Max and Outfitters, for instance.
Mhm.
They offer all these like pretty amazing rods, honestly, for good prices. I mean, dude, I'm a welder.
Yeah.
I make money, but I'm not. I can't afford those really expensive rods and reels. It's just
Mhm.
I've got a family to tend to.
Right.
We've got to eat. We got to keep the lights on. We've got to drive. We got to get to work. We've
Yeah.
got to live that American dream.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think in a lot of ways, a lot of these companies are starting to realize that um, all their sales are not these $1,000 rods and reels anymore,
Right.
because that's not your target. I'm going to say target audience. That sounds kind of shallow, maybe, but it's dudes like us.
The
I
demographic of people.
Yeah.
I started out on that $40 rod myself, and it caught fish.
Yeah.
And you just whatever can get you on the water, man.
Mhm.
Whatever can get you on
Um,
the water.
so one of my go-to rods is actually a TFO. It's a Lefty Cray Pro 2, and I don't think they make them anymore. I think you still may be able to buy them. It's a 8'6" 4-weight, and I had actually got it as a gift, and I I'd looked it up, because I may or may not have warranted it 3 times. Thanks TFO, y'all are great. Looking forward to the 4th time now. So uh, it's you can find them for $120, $160, which to some people may be a lot of money, and rightfully so. I mean, some people don't have the spare scratch to burn like that, and I completely get it.
Mhm.
And some people's idea of affordable is, what's the long term investment? I'm really into this. Let's see where this can go. And you have your companies like Orvis, Sage, everything like that, having more affordable options, but provide the lifetime warranty, or in Orvis's case, a 25-year warranty. Which, let's be honest here, 25 years, that's a long time. So, um, it, when you have that idea in mind of, let's turn this into, I am serious about this. This is now an investment. And you may have the spare scratch, and or you realize, hey, I can't afford this. This is within my means, and you decide to go with that route. Great. And it, like I said earlier, it can improve your fishing experience, but it also means that the guy who's on, your right, who is starting out with that $40 rod, that you know he's not any worse than you are. Y'all are getting after the same fish. you know at the end of the day, the rod is just a pointing stick, and I think it was Brian Flushing who had said that it's just a really expensive, fancy pointing stick. I've told people it's really what's on the end of it that matters. You know, it personal experience. It is really, really difficult to catch a fish without a fly, and I've done it a lot.
Yeah.
Not caught them, but got after them without a fly.
Well, just to, kind of thinking about it all in general, it sounds to me like the Ozarks are a really good, genuine place for somebody just that really loves the outdoors. That obviously the Ozarks are known for their beauty and the diversity of the mountains and everything else. It's one of the things that stands out for the Ozarks, but I've never heard anything negative per se in the outdoor terms from the Ozarks. So it seems to me like if you wanted to actually cut your teeth into something that maybe you wouldn't feel as though you could cut your teeth into anywhere else, sounds like going to the Ozarks is one of those places where people really help each other out. And, it's more of a down home, easygoing experience, the whole blue collar, hey, let's get together, let's, throw the grill in the back of the truck, go down, grill something on the river and hang out, maybe float, go swim, get some crawdads and throw a few flies and hang out. It sounds like a really cool place.
So the people I've met down here, like I said earlier, have been nothing but kind. At this point, you feel like you don't know a stranger. I mean, a complete and total off-topic story. So everybody down here waves at each other. Complete and total strangers. You're driving along, you see somebody, yeah, okay, you keep going. They wave back at you. So my aunt, she went back up. She lives down here, and she went back up to Illinois, and she drove past somebody, and she waved at him, and the guy flicked her off. It's just like, wow, we do come from a different area down here,
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of not knowing a stranger, everybody's a friend type deal, it's heartwarming, especially in times like this where some people, it may be a little rough for people, family crisis, things like that, and having that out and knowing that the person you're fishing next to is, you strike up a conversation with Bert near anybody down here, and you swap fishing stories, do whatever. They'll tell you, hey, I caught, this 18-inch trout over here, 3 weeks ago, or, and 90% of people aren't pulling your leg. Excuse me, because, it just, that's how they are down here. And it is kind of, like I said, you don't really know a stranger. As far as cutting your teeth down here, this is where I cut my teeth for trout, and it's gotten to the point now where I refuse to leave the river skunked. And when I mean I'll take anything at that rate. I've caught a shiner and was like, no, I'm going home. That counts as a fish, right? It has fins, yeah. One eye, and kind of twitching a little, but it counts.
Yeah.
So it's been a learning experience for me personally, coming down here and getting into this community, for lack of a better term. We used to look at fly fishermen and be like, these guys are fly fishing for bass, and we're on a pond going, there ain't no trout in here. What are they doing? And now I'm like, I really need to get after carp. I really need to get after gar. I really want to go catch a mako shark on a fly rod. I really need to hook into a boat. Is you want to do everything on it. So when you realize that it's just another means of catching a fish, just a little bit more involved, and you invent new swear words when you're learning to do it.
Oh yeah.
It definitely brings a whole new thing to the table. And anybody who's interested in it, man, is it a great place to cut your teeth doing it? Absolutely. The river I fish all the time is a fantastic place to, come out, learn how to catch trout. And then you take those skills you learn to another place, and you're like, it's not as easy here. what am I doing wrong? It's like, man, they are different every river. It's just a hunt. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, you learn to adapt and throw a lot of kitchen sinks and school buses at fish, and in high hope that they eat something.
Well, Josh, we are coming up on the end of this, and I'd like to ask you one more question. If there's anything you could tell someone getting into fly fishing, what would you tell them?
So there was a gentleman who he told me his heart doctor told me to get into fly fishing, and I told him his heart doctor was going to kill him. Um, but he was frustrated trying to learn this. But it uh, it kind of goes back to the adage of people saying fly fishing can save lives. If you're really looking for something to get yourself outdoors and kind of involved in something to have that decompression, to have that getaway, whatever it is, man, fly fishing is an excellent way to do it. And it doesn't matter your age, it doesn't matter, gender, race, anything, man, get after it, because you realize all fishing is a jerk on one end waiting for a jerk on the other.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to narrow it down and get a true feel for things of really what it's like to be out there and enjoying the elements, whether it's raining, sleeting, or as we have fished in lightning storms. Don't do that. Don't let anybody stop you, man. I mean, get out there with what you can and get after them. It is not rocket surgery.
Goose, where can everybody find you? And if they want to book a trip, how do they go about doing that?
So the outfit I am with is Spring River Flies and Guides. You can find them on Instagram at Spring River Flies and the Guides. On Facebook, same handle, springriverfliesandguides.com. Just ask for the fat bearded fella. You can check me out on Instagram. I am Goose Guides Flies with, are they underscores?
They are underscores.
Yeah, underscores underneath each one of those words. Goose Guides Flies. Yeah, that. Yeah.
Dude, thanks so much for taking time out of your day and just coming in and hanging out with us and talking.
Man, I appreciate it. This is awesome.
It's been a treat, dude. It's so refreshing to meet people like you that are out there doing great things for the sport.
Man, I just tell people I'm an idiot that likes to fish.
Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for reaching out to us too, and shooting those messages over. When I saw them, I'm like, whoa, this is pretty cool. A lot of times, and who knows how many people are going to still be watching this by the time I'm able to say this. But a lot of times it's always kind of a mystery to us as to who's really listening to the message of what we're trying to spread here. And during this, when we do the podcast, when we do the fishing, when we do the fly tying, and all the stuff that John and I do with our content, and it's really nice to know that we're starting to connect with a few folks out there, and to really get the message out that anybody can do this. Anybody can have a good time with it. Don't let people tell you you can't. And it's really refreshing to hear a guide actually say that, because I've heard guides say, oh yeah, anybody can do this, but they don't sincerely mean it. I know a couple good guides that don't do that, but I've heard a lot of other guides that have said, well, we're not really going to help you out. We'll kind of lead the horse to, kind of halfway to the water, but for you to, understand the depth and gravity, and not like just basically be this marketing PR person for the most expensive gear. That's refreshing for me to hear, especially in the fly world, because man, out west here, these people are going to basically drive themselves to extinction. There will not be fly fishing 25, 30 years down the road if these people keep this up. and it's going to be one of those other things. It's going to be like a archaeological discovery down the road that, oh, wow, people used to use this and whip it back and forth and catch fish, because the people that are in it just drive people away instead of
You're gonna be looking
bringing
at this relic going, what is a marten?
Yeah, exactly. They're going to be over there, the lines falling apart, white gloves, everything else.
No, and it is. I mean, hiring a guide is, always an experience. And I think one of the things, especially if you're just getting into it, we supply everything you need. You
Mhm.
come play with our stuff. And see if you really like it. It's always an option people can take. You know,
Yeah.
you know. But if it's just something you want to try out there, and we call it getting on the water playing with a whippy stick, man, get after it. It's about enjoying the outdoors and doing it right. There was some president had said it. If people knew what was important, I think it was the president. I'm misquoting that terribly, but they said if people knew what was important in life, there'd be a shortage of fishing poles. It's true. I mean, it is one of those things that I can't say it changed your life, but it definitely gives you a different way to deal with it, and having the ability, to have accessible water and things like that is super important.
Mhm.
So, uh, making sure that your waterways stay clean, everything like that, it's another big part of it. And that's a whole nother hour and a half conversation we could have. But man, just get out there, enjoy it, pick up trash on your way out, and come back the next week whenever you can. Do it again. You will eventually get better at it.
Solid.
If you don't, feel free to ask anybody questions. Shoot me messages. Do whatever you got to do. Just enjoy it. That's all it comes down to.
Well, once again, Josh, thanks so much, man.
I appreciate it, brother.
And for everyone still listening, you can find us at Working Class Fishing on Instagram, Working Class Fishing Podcast on YouTube. We're on several major listening platforms. We've got a Facebook page now. Don't go killing each other over on Facebook. I don't want to deal with that. So just everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll see you on next time.
See you guys.